The wind howled like a banshee across the desolate plains of Varelia 9, tearing at the reinforced structures of the remote outpost. Rain lashed down in near horizontal sheets, turning the already treacherous landscape into a churning mire. Dr. Lucas Hale squinted through the observation dome. The storm's fury, a familiar, unwelcome companion. For 5 standard years, he had studied the tortured ecology of this world, a planet ravaged by atmospheric decay and relentless, acidic precipitation. His work was solitary, often disheartening, charting the slow death of an ecosystem under skies the color of bruised plums. Tonight, however, the storm felt different, angrier, its voice carrying an unusual pitch of desperation. A proximity alert chimed, cutting through the storm's roar. Lucas turned, surprised. Nothing ventured out in weather like this. Not even the hard-shelled native arthropods he occasionally tracked. The sensor display showed a small, unidentified energy signature struggling near the gorge, close to where the seasonal flash floods turned the dry riverbed into a lethal torrent. Protocol dictated caution, non-interference with potential off-world anomalies unless absolutely necessary. But the signature was fading rapidly, flickering like a dying candle in the gale. Curiosity warred with prudence. He strapped on his environmental suit, the heavy-duty seals clicking into place, grabbed a rescue beacon and thermal scanner, and cycled through the airlock into the maelstrom. Outside, the wind threatened to rip him from his feet. Visibility was almost zero, the rain stinging his visor. He leaned into the gale, following the scanner's unsteady bearing towards the gorge. The ground beneath his magnetic boots squelched, unstable and slick. He could hear the roar of the river now, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the soles of his feet. It was rising fast, far faster than his meteorological models had predicted. As he neared the edge, the scanner pinged insistently. There, caught amongst debris swirling in the muddy, fast-moving water, was a figure. It was humanoid, slender, struggling weakly against the current that was trying to pull it under. Lucas cursed, securing a grapple line to a sturdy rock outcropping before carefully making his way down the slippery bank. The figure wore no environmental suit, only strange, close-fitting garments that offered little protection against the corrosive rain or the chilling water. As he got closer, he saw pale skin, long, dark hair plastered across delicate features, and wide, terrified eyes. An alien, definitely not human. She was clutching something to her chest, a container of some sort, glowing with a soft internal light. He reached her just as a particularly violent surge threatened to submerge her completely. He clipped the rescue line to a harness integrated into her strange clothing, a feature he hadn't noticed immediately. "Hold on!" he shouted over the wind and water. "I'll get you out." Her eyes, large and luminous even in the dim light filtering through the storm clouds, fixed on his face. She seemed impossibly fragile against the raging elements. Her lips moved, forming words in a language he didn't understand. The sound swallowed by the storm. Then, with a surge of effort, she pushed the glowing container towards him, her voice barely a whisper, yet piercing through the chaos with startling clarity. Save the case." He took the container. It was unexpectedly light, pulsing with a gentle warmth against his gloved hands. It felt strangely alive. He secured it to his own harness before turning his full attention to pulling her free. The current fought him, dragging at them both, but the winch on his grapple line held firm. Slowly, painstakingly, he hauled them both back up the treacherous bank, away from the hungry river. She collapsed onto the muddy ground, shivering violently, her breathing ragged. The container she had guarded so fiercely lay beside her, its soft glow unwavering. Lucas knelt beside her, checking her vitals with his suit's integrated scanner. Weak pulse, hypothermia setting in fast. The acidic rain was already causing faint burns on her exposed skin. "We need to get you inside," he said. Though he doubted she understood, he carefully lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than she looked, yet possessed a surprising resilience. She didn't protest, her head lolling against his chest plate, her gaze fixed on the container he carried. The journey back to the outpost was arduous. The storm showed no signs of abating, and carrying the unconscious alien slowed him considerably. The container, however, continued its steady, rhythmic glow, a small beacon of warmth against the cold fury of Viralia 9. Inside the airlock, the decontamination sequence hissed, washing away the corrosive rain and sterilizing their suits. He carried her through to the small medical bay, stripping off his own suit before gently removing her soaked, alien garments. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in places, marked by intricate, silvery patterns that seemed to shift subtly under the medbay lights. He wrapped her in thermal blankets and initiated warming protocols, connecting monitors to track her recovery. Only then did he turn his attention to the container. It was roughly cylindrical, fashioned from a material he didn't recognize, smooth, dark, and seemingly seamless, yet radiating that soft, internal light. There were no obvious controls, no markings he could decipher. Placing it on a diagnostic table, he ran a low-level scan. The results were baffling. It contained complex organic matter, exhibiting incredibly high levels of bioenergy and rapid cellular regeneration. More than that, the internal structure was adapting, shifting, responding to the scan itself. It was alive, but not just alive. The energy pattern suggested something akin to nascent consciousness. What had this woman risked her life to save? His rescued guest began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the sterile brightness of the med bay. She pushed herself up weakly, her gaze immediately finding the container. Relief washed over her features, so profound it was almost painful to witness. She looked at Lucas, her expression wary but no longer terrified. She pointed a slender finger towards herself. "Kaelith," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Then she pointed at the container. "Tareth." Lucas nodded slowly. "I'm Lucas, Dr. Lucas Hale," he pointed to himself. "You're safe here, Kaelith, you and Tareth." He gestured towards the glowing case. Kaelith watched him intently, seeming to understand the gist, if not the words. She reached out a trembling hand, not towards the container, but towards his arm, her cool fingers brushing against his skin. A silent gesture of gratitude. In that moment, surrounded by the howling storm outside and the quiet hum of his isolated outpost, Lucas felt a profound shift. His solitary existence on Viralia 9 had just become infinitely more complicated, and perhaps infinitely more important. The dying world outside suddenly seemed less significant than the mystery held within the glowing case, and the fragile alien life he had pulled from the flood. Days turned into weeks under the bruised Virilian sky. The great storm eventually exhausted itself, leaving behind a landscape scoured clean and skies momentarily clear, revealing twin moons hanging like silver pendants in the thin atmosphere. Inside the outpost, a tentative routine formed. Kaelith recovered quickly, her alien physiology proving remarkably resilient. Communication remained a challenge, bridged by gestures, simple drawings, and the outpost's translation software, which struggled valiantly with her complex, melodic language, but improved with each interaction. Lucas learned she was a xenobiologist from a distant star system, part of a research collective dedicated to planetary revitalization. Her vessel had encountered unexpected atmospheric turbulence near Varelia 9, resulting in a catastrophic crash landing during the storm. She was the sole survivor, the object of her desperate protection. The Tareth remained the focus of their shared attention, Kaelith explained. Through halting translations and intricate diagrams she drew on a data slate, that the Tareth was not merely a specimen, but a bioengineered organism of incredible potential. It was designed, she conveyed, to be a keystone species for terraforming, capable of adapting to hostile environments and initiating rapid ecological regeneration. Its genetic structure contained sequences harvested from countless extremophiles across the galaxy, interwoven with a unique bioluminescent matrix that functioned as both a power source and a method of environmental interaction. It could, in theory, analyze planetary conditions and actively rewrite local biology, seeding atmospheres with oxygen-producing microbes, neutralizing toxins in soil and water, and accelerating the growth of introduced flora. But something was wrong. The Tareth, housed within its protective stasis case, which also served as a diagnostic chamber, was failing. Its internal light, once steady and strong, now flickered erratically. Cellular degradation alarms pulsed intermittently on the case's display, indicators Kaelith translated with growing anxiety. The crash, the exposure to Varelia 99's hostile environment, or perhaps an inherent flaw in its complex design, the cause was unclear. But the Tareth's adaptation sequence was destabilizing. It was dying. It cannot fail, Kaelith insisted, her voice tight with urgency, her grasp of Terran standard improving rapidly under Lucas's patient tutelage. It is the last. The prototype worked, but the templates, the core data, only this one holds the complete matrix. Lucas, initially driven by scientific curiosity, found himself increasingly invested. The sheer audacity of the Tareth's design, the hope it represented for worlds like Varelia 9, resonated deeply with his own work, his own quiet despair at witnessing planetary decay. He threw himself into helping Kaelith, his expertise in extremophile biology and environmental adaptation proving unexpectedly relevant. They worked side by side in the small lab adjoining the med bay, poring over the complex data streams emanating from the Tareth's case. Lucas brought his analytical skills, his understanding of terrestrial ecological collapse and resilience. Kaelith brought her intimate knowledge of the Tareth's alien biochemistry, its unique energy systems, and the theoretical principles behind its terraforming capabilities. Their collaboration transcended language barriers. A shared glance across a complex diagnostic screen, a mutually understood frustration at a failed simulation, a quiet satisfaction when a minor adjustment stabilized a fluctuating energy reading. These became their language. Lucas found himself drawn to Kaelith's fierce determination, her unwavering belief in the Tareth's purpose, tempered by a gentleness that surfaced in quiet moments. He saw the weight she carried, the responsibility for this last hope, not just for her people, but potentially for countless dying worlds. Kaelith, Todd in turn, seemed to find solace in Lucas's steady presence, his pragmatic approach grounding her desperation. She saw his empathy, his quiet dedication to life, even on a world largely abandoned by it. A connection formed, unspoken but palpable, woven from shared purpose and burgeoning respect. They discovered the core issue lay in the Tareth's energy regulation system. It was struggling to process the ambient radiation and atmospheric composition of Varelia 9, treating the environment as a hostile element to be overcome rather than a medium to adapt to. Its internal systems were essentially fighting a war against the planet, burning through reserves and destabilizing its genetic structure in the process. It needs recalibration, Lucas mused, tracing patterns on the display. Its adaptive protocols are too aggressive. It perceives threat where it should perceive potential. Kaelith nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. The initial programming assumed deployment on sterile, lifeless worlds, not wounded ones like this. She gestured vaguely towards the window, towards the bleak landscape outside. It requires a buffer, a way to interpret, not just react, working together. They began designing a modification, a software patch woven with biological triggers. Lucas suggested incorporating algorithms based on symbiotic relationships found in Earth's deep-sea hydrothermal vents, where life thrived in extreme conditions through cooperation, not conflict. Kaelith adapted his concepts, translating them into the complex bioenergetic language of the Tareth's matrix. It was painstaking work, requiring simulations run on the outpost's modest computer core, cross-referenced with the Tareth's fluctuating biological readouts. They worked late into the cycles, fueled by nutrient paste and shared determination. The only sounds the hum of machinery and the occasional, distant howl of the Varelian wind. Finally, after countless iterations, they developed a potential solution, a modulation sequence designed to dampen the Tareth's aggressive adaptive response, encouraging it to sample and integrate local environmental data more slowly, more selectively. It was a gamble. Introducing new code into such a complex, unstable system could accelerate its collapse. Kaelith hesitated, her hand hovering over the interface that would upload the patch to the stasis case. If this fails, Lucas met her gaze, his expression steady. If we do nothing, it will fail anyway. We built this solution together. Kaelith. Based on sound principles, we have to trust our work. Trust it. He nodded towards the case, where the Tareth's light pulsed weakly, a fragile heartbeat in the sterile lab. Taking a deep breath, Kaelith initiated the upload. They watched the monitors with bated breath, tracking the Tareth's vital signs. For a tense moment, energy levels dipped alarmingly. Red warning glyphs flared across the display. Kaelith let out a small gasp, but then, slowly, miraculously, the fluctuations began to smooth out. The erratic flickering of the internal light steadied, becoming a calmer, rhythmic pulse. Cellular degradation warnings faded. Key biomarkers climbed back towards stable parameters. The modification was working. The Tareth wasn't just surviving, it seemed to be integrating, healing. A wave of relief washed over them, so potent it left them momentarily speechless. Kaelith slumped back in her chair, covering her face with her hands. Lucas reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. She looked up, her luminous eyes shining with unshed tears. "We did it, Lucas," she whispered. "We did it." In that shared moment of triumph, the professional barrier between them seemed to dissolve entirely. The long hours, the shared anxiety, the intellectual connection, it had forged something deeper. Lucas felt an unexpected warmth spread through him, a connection he hadn't realized he'd been missing in his years of isolation. Kaelith's smile, tentative but genuine, mirrored his own feelings. The future of the Tareth, and perhaps the future of many worlds, seemed brighter. But even as they savored their success, a new, colder alert began flashing on Lucas's main console, an encrypted, high-priority transmission incoming from off-world. It wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Kaelith, using protocols he didn't recognize, bypassing his station's standard firewalls as if they weren't there. Suspicion, cold and sharp, pierced through the warmth of their recent victory. Who else knew Kaelith was here? And how? The incoming transmission displayed Kaelith's native script, characters flowing elegantly across the screen. Her expression shifted as she read, relief quickly replaced by confusion, then dawning horror. Her face paled, her eyes widening. No, she breathed, stepping back from the console as if it were venomous. They knew. Lucas moved to her side. Knew what? Kaelith. Who is this from? Her voice trembled. My government. The agency that funded the Tareth project. She gestured numbly at the screen. They tracked my escape pod's telemetry. They've been monitoring us, Lucas. Since I arrived, the implications struck Lucas with the force of a physical blow. The outpost systems, his logs, their shared research data, all potentially compromised. Monitoring how? He demanded, his mind racing. Checking security protocols he hadn't thought to doubt in years. He found it almost immediately, a subtle backdoor program, expertly hidden within the translation software updates he downloaded to better communicate with Kaelith. It had been siphoning data packets, relaying everything. Their work on stabilizing the Tareth, their breakthrough modification. Kaelith pointed a shaking finger at a specific line of text in the transmission. The translation software, ironically, rendered its meaning with chilling clarity. They congratulate me, she whispered, disbelief warring with anger in her voice. Congratulate me on successfully field testing adaptive recalibration under hostile conditions. They have replicated our modification. Lucas, they ran simulations. Her voice dropped, filled with dread. Simulations for weaponization. The cold dread solidified in Lucas's stomach. The Tareth, designed as a tool of creation and renewal, twisted into a weapon. A bioagent capable of rewriting planetary ecosystems not to heal, but to destroy. To neutralize entire worlds, perhaps. The agency hadn't just monitored them, they had used them, exploited their desperation and Kaelith's unique knowledge, turning their collaborative effort to save the creature into a blueprint for destruction. The message ended with coordinates and instructions. Kaelith was to await rendezvous with a designated vessel. Commander Soren Vesk, commanding, to transfer the Tareth specimen for secure containment and further strategic development. Vesk. Kaelith spat the name like poison. Head of military research. He always argued that Tareth's potential was too dangerous to be purely civilian. He wanted control. Betrayal radiated from her, raw and agonizing. Her own people. The very organization she had dedicated her life to, had not only abandoned her after the crash, but had actively spied on her, waiting to steal the fruits of her potential success alongside an unsuspecting human researcher. They can't have it, Kaelith, Lucas said, his voice low and firm. The outpost, once his sanctuary, now felt like a trap. They had stabilized the Tareth, saved it from collapse, only to deliver it into the hands of those who would corrupt its purpose. We can't let them. Panic gave way to resolve in Kaelith's eyes. No, we won't. She looked at the Tareth's case, its light now pulsing with a steady, healthy rhythm. It seemed almost aware, a silent participant in their unfolding crisis. Vesk will not turn this hope into a weapon. They had maybe hours, perhaps less. Before Vesk's ship arrived in orbit, the outpost was too exposed, its location known. They needed to disappear. Lucas began shutting down non-essential systems, purging sensitive data logs, trying to cover their tracks. Kaelith gathered essential supplies, her movements quick and efficient. They carefully packaged the Tareth stasis case, ensuring its life support remained stable. Where can we go? Kaelith asked, pausing in her preparations. Virilia 9 is vast, but barren. There are few places to hide from orbital scans, Lucas thought quickly. There was one possibility, a long shot, an old seismic monitoring station, abandoned years ago when the planetary survey funding was cut. It was deep within the equatorial canyons, shielded by dense rock formations and perpetual electromagnetic interference from geological activity. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. There's a geological survey outpost, decommissioned, deep in the canyons. Our transport skimmer might make it if we push it. Just as they finished loading the small, rugged skimmer housed in the outpost's vehicle bay, the proximity alarm shrieked again. Not a storm warning this time. A vessel signature, military grade, entering high atmosphere, descending fast. Vesk. He was already here. Go. Now, Lucas yelled, pushing Kaelith towards the skimmer's cockpit. He slammed the bay doors shut behind them and powered up the engines. The vehicle lifting silently on its anti-gravity emitters. He guided the skimmer out through a concealed exit tunnel, designed for emergency evacuations, burrowing low into the scarred landscape just as a sleek, gunmetal gray ship settled heavily beside the now darkened outpost. Searchlights from the newly arrived vessel swept across the terrain. Lucas pushed the skimmer's engines to their maximum, hugging the contours of the land, weaving through rock formations and eroded gullies. A red targeting laser painted the ground just behind them. They were spotted. Hold on, Lucas grunted, throwing the skimmer into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding an energy blast that scorched the rock face where they had been moments before. The chase was on. The military vessel pursuing them was faster, more heavily armed. Energy bolts stitched the air around the small skimmer, forcing Lucas into increasingly desperate evasive maneuvers. The canyon walls flashed past, a blur of red rock and shadow. Kaelith braced herself, her eyes fixed on the Tareth's case secured between their seats. Its internal light began to pulse faster, brighter, reacting to the stress. The energy discharges, the sheer velocity of their flight. He's gaining, Kaelith stated, her voice strained. Watching the tactical display Lucas had activated, Vesk's ship was relentless, herding them deeper into the canyon network, cutting off potential escape routes. Another blast rocked the skimmer, alarms screaming as secondary systems failed. Suddenly, the Tareth's case flared with an intense, blinding light. Energy surged through the skimmer's damaged systems, not destructively, but supportively. The failing engines whined, then roared back to full power, momentarily exceeding their design limits. On the tactical display, a massive energy signature bloomed directly behind them, a focused burst of electromagnetic interference that scrambled the targeting systems of Vesk's pursuing ship. What was that? Lucas gasped, fighting the controls as the skimmer surged forward. Kaelith stared at the Tareth's case, now dimmed slightly, its light pulsing weakly again. It helped us, she whispered, awestruck. It shielded us, diverted power. The creature, the specimen, had acted. It had understood their peril and intervened, sacrificing its own energy reserves to aid their escape. This was more than instinct, more than programmed response. It was choice. The momentary reprieve was all they needed. Lucas veered sharply into a narrow side canyon, one barely wide enough for the skimmer, masked by heavy magnetic interference according to his old survey maps. Behind them, momentarily blinded and disoriented, Vesk's ship roared past the opening, continuing down the main canyon. They were clear. For now, Lucas navigated the skimmer deeper into the twisting maze of rock, finally bringing it to rest inside a large cavern that housed the crumbling remnants of the old seismic station. Silence descended, broken only by the dripping of water and the weary sigh of the skimmer's cooling engines. They had escaped, thanks to the unexpected intervention of the very creature they were trying to save. Lucas looked at Kaelith, then at the Tareth's case. The stakes had just been raised impossibly higher. They weren't just protecting a biological marvel anymore. They were protecting something that was beginning to show signs of genuine sentience, and it had just saved their lives. The weight of their responsibility felt immense, settling upon them in the cool, echoing silence of the hidden cavern. The abandoned seismic station was primitive but functional. Its power core still held a residual charge, enough for basic life support and lighting. Thick layers of rock overhead offered protection from orbital scans. Lucas worked quickly to camouflage the skimmer and erase their entry trail, while Kaelith attended to the Tareth. The creature's energy levels were dangerously low after its intervention during the chase. Its light pulsed faintly, irregularly. It exerted itself too much, Kaelith murmured, running diagnostics through a portable interface linked to the case. The modification we made, it allowed for environmental energy absorption, but also expenditure. It seems it learned to control it far faster than we anticipated. It saved us, Lucas stated quietly, joining her beside the case. It understood the danger. It acted deliberately. Kaelith nodded, her expression a mixture of worry and wonder. It is. More than the designs predicted. More than I ever imagined. The implications were staggering. If the Tareth possessed even nascent sentience, then Vesk's plan to weaponize it became exponentially more horrifying. It wasn't just misuse of technology, it was the enslavement and perversion of a thinking being. They needed help. Hiding in the canyons was a temporary solution at best. Vesk wouldn't give up easily, and their resources were limited. Lucas considered their options. Contacting Earth authorities was risky. Bureaucracy and political maneuvering could be just as dangerous as Vesk's direct approach. Kaelith's people had already betrayed her. There was one person, however, who might understand, who operated outside the rigid structures of governments and corporations, Dr. Elena Morell, his former mentor, a brilliant but iconoclastic biologist who had left academia years ago to establish an independent research haven in a neutral asteroid belt known as the Coriolis Drift. Elena valued scientific integrity and ethical conduct above all else. If anyone could offer sanctuary and guidance, it was her. Getting a message out was the challenge. Any standard communication risked detection. Lucas remembered the station's original purpose, deep core seismic monitoring. It used tightly focused, low-frequency resonance pulses to probe the planet's mantle. With significant modification, perhaps one of these pulses could be encoded with a compressed message packet, aimed precisely at a known relay satellite in the Coriolis Drift network. It was complex, requiring intricate knowledge of both geology and communications technology, and there was no guarantee Elena would even receive it, let alone respond. But it was safer than any conventional broadcast. While Kaelith focused on stabilizing the Tareth, gently coaxing its energy levels back up, using nutrient solutions and carefully modulated environmental inputs fed into the stasis case. Lucas worked tirelessly on the seismic transmitter. He cannibalized parts from the skimmer's communication array, rewrote targeting algorithms based on outdated star charts stored in the station's archives, and ran countless simulations. Hours bled into days in the dim, subterranean refuge. They spoke little, conserving energy. Their shared purpose a silent bond. The Tareth's light grew steadily stronger, its pulse evening out, responding positively to Kaelith's care. Occasionally, the light would shift in color, complex patterns swirling across its surface. Patterns Kaelith was beginning to suspect were not random, but attempts at communication. Finally, Lucas was ready. He inputted Elena's unique identifier code, embedded the encrypted message detailing their situation and requesting asylum, and aimed the modified seismic emitter towards the calculated point in the Varelian sky. He initiated the pulse sequence. A low hum filled the cavern, vibrating through the rock, then silence. There was no way to know if it had worked. All they could do was wait and hope. Several tense cycles passed. They maintained minimal activity, monitoring local comm channels for any sign of Vesk's forces. The silence stretched thin. Doubt began to creep in. Had the message failed? Had Elena ignored it? Or worse, been unable to help? Then, a flicker of data appeared on one of the station's archaic consoles, a secure, tightly encrypted signal originating from the Coriolis drift. It was Elena's response, short, concise, and exactly what they needed: coordinates for a rendezvous point in deep space, far from Virelia 9, and a simple message: Sanctuary offered. Proceed with caution. Mirel out. Relief washed over Lucas, quickly followed by the logistical challenge. Their skimmer lacked interstellar capability, but Elena had anticipated that. Her message included authentication codes for a long-range courier vessel, currently docked at a semi-abandoned asteroid mining facility on the far side of Varelia 99's largest moon. It was automated, deniable, and waiting for their arrival. The journey from the canyons to the lunar mining facility was fraught with risk. They traveled only during periods of maximum atmospheric interference, using the planet's magnetic storms as cover, constantly scanning for Vesk's ship, luck, or perhaps the Tareth's subtle influence on local sensor readings held. They reached the moon undetected, locating the hidden docking bay and the sleek courier ship waiting within. Transferring the Tareth and their minimal supplies aboard, Lucas initiated the launch sequence. The small ship detached smoothly from the asteroid's surface, accelerating rapidly into the black expanse of space, leaving the troubled system of Varelia 9 behind. As the bruised plum colors of the planet receded in the viewport, Kaelith gently touched the Tareth's case. Its light pulsed warmly, bathing the cockpit in a soft glow. They were fugitives, running towards an uncertain future, but they were together, and the creature they protected was safe. For now. Its potential, once a theoretical marvel, now felt like a profound responsibility, not just to science, but to life itself. The escape from Varelia 9 was not an end, but a new, more complex beginning. The Coriolis drift was a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of Varelia 9, a swirling nebula of asteroids, dust clouds, and decommissioned space stations. It existed in the gray areas of interstellar law, a haven for independent researchers, fringe colonies, and those seeking anonymity. Dr. Elena Morell's research station, designated Sanctuary, was nestled deep within the densest part of the belt, shielded from casual observation by overlapping sensor baffling fields and navigational hazards. The courier ship, guided by Elena's precise coordinates, navigated the asteroid field with practiced ease, finally docking smoothly within a concealed hangar bay carved into a large, irregular asteroid. Elena Morell greeted them personally at the airlock. She was older than Lucas remembered, her hair now streaked with silver, but her eyes held the same sharp intelligence and unwavering intensity. She regarded Lucas with a warm, appraising look, then turned her gaze to Kaelith, offering a respectful nod. Her focus, however, was immediately drawn to the glowing container Kaelith carried. So, this is the source of the interplanetary commotion. Elena's voice was calm, measured, betraying none of the urgency Lucas knew she must feel. The Tareth, reports from my less official contacts spoke of remarkable potential and considerable danger. She led them through sterile corridors humming with quiet activity. Labs filled with exotic equipment and personnel who moved with quiet purpose. Sanctuary was clearly more than just a hideout. It was a state-of-the-art research facility, dedicated to pursuits likely deemed too controversial or ethically complex for mainstream institutions. In a secure biocontainment lab, far more advanced than Lucas's outpost, they settled the Tareth. Elena's initial scans confirmed their findings, the creature's unique biology, its near-death state following the crash, and the effectiveness of the modification Lucas and Kaelith had implemented. But her diagnostics probed deeper, revealing complexities they hadn't fully grasped. Its neural network, Elena murmured, studying a complex holographic display showing the Tareth's internal energy flows. It's not just processing data, it's learning, adapting its own core programming. Your modification didn't just stabilize it, it seems to have unlocked something. This confirmed their suspicion. The Tareth was demonstrating emergent sentience. Its actions during the escape weren't mere reflexes. We believe Vesk intends to weaponize it, Lucas explained, detailing the intercepted message and the simulations. Turn its terraforming ability into a method of planetary sterilization. Elena's expression hardened. Soren Vesk. I know of him. Ruthless, ambitious, and utterly devoid of ethical restraint. He represents the worst kind of military appropriation of scientific discovery. She looked from Lucas to Kaelith, then back to the Tareth, now pulsing calmly in its containment field. He cannot be allowed to succeed. This facility is secure, but Vesk has resources. He will hunt you, and he will hunt this creature. We need to protect it, Kaelith stated firmly. Not just hide it. Ensure it can never be used as they intend. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Protection requires understanding, and perhaps enhancement, not for weaponization, but for self-preservation. Ethical safeguards woven into its very genetic code. She proposed a daring plan, using Sanctuary's advanced gene sequencing technology. They could analyze the Tareth's rapidly evolving matrix and introduce specific biological markers, essentially locking its terraforming capabilities. These safeguards would prevent its abilities from being activated for destructive purposes or controlled by unauthorized external signals, like those Vesk's team would undoubtedly try to use. It would be intrinsically bound to creative, life-affirming processes. The work was delicate, pushing the boundaries of known genetic engineering. Lucas brought his understanding of ecological balance, ensuring the safeguards wouldn't cripple the Tareth's primary function. Kaelith provided the crucial link, her innate understanding of the Tareth's alien biology, allowing her to translate Elena's theoretical safeguards into compatible biocode. Elena herself oversaw the process, her vast experience guiding their efforts, preventing catastrophic errors. During this intense period, the Tareth continued to evolve, confined no longer to its original case, but housed in a larger, nutrient-rich biosphere within the lab. It began to interact more deliberately with its surroundings. The bioluminescent patterns shifted from simple pulses to complex, flowing displays of light and color. Kaelith, spending hours observing it, began to recognize recurring sequences, correlating them with external stimuli or their own presence in the lab. It's communicating, she announced one cycle, excitement lighting her face. Not with words, but with light, emotions, concepts. She and Lucas started attempting to respond, using modulated light frequencies and simple geometric patterns projected into the biosphere, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The Tareth reacted. It mirrored their patterns, altered them, responded with intricate displays that seemed to convey curiosity, caution, even something akin to affection. It showed a clear preference for Kaelith's presence, its light brightening whenever she approached, and it seemed to react with calm assurance to Lucas's steady observation. It was bonding with them. The scientific specimen was undeniably becoming a partner, a sentient being they were not just studying, but protecting as one would a colleague or a friend. The genetic safeguarding procedure was a success, integrated seamlessly into the Tareth's matrix. The ethical locks were undetectable and, according to Elena's simulations, unbreakable without destroying the organism itself. The Tareth could heal worlds, but it could never be forced to harm them. Their sanctuary, however, was about to be breached, not by force, but by politics. News of Kaelith's survival, the existence of the Tareth, and Vesk's pursuit had inevitably leaked through clandestine channels. Both EarthGov and Kaelith's Homeworld.command, now facing awkward questions about Vesk's unsanctioned operation and the potential theft of revolutionary technology, demanded access. Under pressure, Elena Morell brokered a tense compromise. A joint delegation would meet at Sanctuary, a neutral ground, to discuss the future of the Tareth. Vesk, though officially reprimanded, was included in Kaelith's Homeworld delegation, a clear sign that the military faction still wielded considerable influence. The atmosphere in Sanctuary's main conference room was thick with tension. EarthGov representatives, cautious and bureaucratic. Kaelith's people, led by a stern-faced minister but clearly shadowed by Commander Vesk, whose expression was a mask of cold fury. Elena Morell presided, radiating calm authority. Lucas and Kaelith stood not as defendants, but as advocates for the Tareth. The arguments began immediately. EarthGov spoke of containment, study under controlled conditions, the potential risks. Kaelith's minister spoke of repatriation, national interest, the asset developed by their scientists. Vesk interjected, his voice sharp, arguing for strategic control, dismissing the notion of sentience as wishful thinking, a byproduct of unstable bioengineering. It is a tool, Vesk declared, his eyes fixed on Kaelith, a powerful one that must be managed appropriately for planetary security. Kaelith countered passionately, describing the Tareth's demonstrable intelligence, its communication, its deliberate act of self-sacrifice. Lucas provided scientific data, highlighting the genetic safeguards they had implemented, proving it could not be weaponized. It is not a tool to be controlled, Lucas stated firmly. It is a life form, capable of choice, deserving of respect. The debate raged, circling endlessly around issues of ownership, control, and potential threat. It seemed an impasse. Then, Elena Morell quietly activated a holographic display linked directly to the Tareth's biosphere. The creature appeared before the delegates, not as a data stream, but as a living image, floating serenely in its environment. And then, it began to communicate, not with random pulses, but with deliberate, intricate patterns of light, far more complex than anything Lucas or Kaelith had witnessed before. It directed specific sequences towards each delegation, towards EarthGov top patterns suggesting growth, renewal, blooming flowers of light, towards Kaelith's people, sequences that seemed to echo ancient constellations from their home system, symbols of peace and creation. Towards Vesk, the light pulsed a deep, warning red, a clear signal of rejection, before shifting back to calming blues and greens directed at Kaelith and Lucas. It held the room captivated, silencing the arguments. There was no mistaking the intelligence, the intent, the peaceful nature conveyed through its silent language of light. It was demonstrating its own sentience, pleading its own case more eloquently than any words could. The effect was profound. The EarthGov delegates exchanged stunned glances, Kaelith's minister seemed deeply moved, visibly distancing himself from Vesk, whose face was a thunderous mask. Even some of Vesk's own aides looked uneasy. Elena Morel let the silence stretch, allowing the Tareth's display to sink in. "It seems," Elena said finally, her voice resonating in the quiet room, "that the subject of our debate has offered its own testimony. The question is no longer about control or ownership. It is about partnership." The Tareth's intervention shifted the entire dynamic. Faced with undeniable evidence of sentience, coupled with the revelation of the unbreakable ethical safeguards, the arguments for containment or weaponization collapsed. Vesk was sidelined, his authority undermined. A new consensus began to form, one based on cooperation rather than conflict. The outcome was unprecedented. The Tareth was formally recognized by both governments as a newly discovered sentient species, entitled to rights and protections. Its terraforming abilities were acknowledged as a gift, not a weapon, and oversight was granted not to any single government or military body, but to a new joint initiative dedicated to planetary renewal. By unanimous agreement, Dr. Lucas Hale and Kaelith were appointed as co-directors of this initiative, tasked with guiding the Tareth's integration and overseeing its first projects. Elena Morel's sanctuary would serve as the initial base of operations, a neutral scientific ground for this new era of interspecies collaboration. Months later, Lucas and Kaelith stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, a vessel specifically designed for the Terraforming initiative. Below them, through the main viewport, stretched the surface of Xylos Prime's innermost moon, once a barren, airless rock, now showing faint, promising patches of green. In a specially constructed biosphere aboard the ship, the Tareth thrived. It was larger now, its light patterns constantly shifting with complex beauty. And it was no longer alone. It had reproduced, budding smaller versions of itself, tiny lights beginning their own journey of growth and learning. Guided by Lucas's environmental analysis and Kaelith's intuitive communication with the creatures, the Tareth and its offspring were slowly, steadily transforming the moon. Microbes seeded the thin, manufactured atmosphere. Lichens broke down rock, creating the first soils. Hardy grasses, bioengineered for the nascent environment, were taking root. It was the dawn of a new world, facilitated not by force, but by understanding and cooperation. Kaelith leaned against Lucas, watching the Tareth family communicate in silent symphonies of light within their habitat. The bond between the human researcher and the alien biologist, forged in crisis and collaboration, had deepened into a quiet, profound partnership, both professional and deeply personal. They had saved the Tareth, and in doing so, had helped forge a path towards a more hopeful future, not just for one creature or one moon, but potentially for countless worlds across the galaxy. "It's working," Lucas murmured, awe still coloring his voice as he watched the telemetry showing rising oxygen levels on the moon below. Kaelith smiled, her gaze meeting his, reflecting the soft glow from the Tareth biosphere. "We worked. It trusted us. And now—" She gestured towards the viewport, towards the moon beginning to breathe under their care. "Now, life returns. Together." They stood watching the birth of a new ecosystem, pioneers on the frontier of planetary renewal. The whispers of the dying Tareth Kaelith had carried from the floodwaters of Viralia 9 had become a beacon of hope, illuminating a future built on shared purpose and the profound, transformative power of life itself. The case was saved, and what was inside had not just left a human frozen in awe, but had opened a door to a universe of possibility, healing, and connection. Their journey was far from over, but they would face it together, under the light of new dawns.